Ready to go? That's right. Welcome. Welcome to Revelation chapter 17. Boy, we just keep moving along, which is great. Thank everybody in class. You want to give a big shout out to our streaming live audience. That's everybody clap. We're allowed to say, yay! They never get any love, so we want to give the... Yeah, we could turn the cameras around. Everybody can see. Just want to give love to those who are not with us, but with us in spirit. And dessert. Whatever all these are going to be tonight. All right. No papers, but I got it all on the board here for you. Let's begin with prayer, and after we do that, we're going to jump into Revelation chapter 17. So let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you for today and a chance to get together with your people and worship your name and lift you up. And Father, I pray that this text that we read tonight won't overwhelm us, that we will have clarity, and but Lord, it would also scare us enough to understand just how ugly the enemy is. And Lord, that we would recognize this in our lives, recognize this in our culture, and be wise to it in how we react to it. May your grace always be upon us, and may your wisdom be with us as we learn. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, Revelation 17 is a grotesque chapter. If Hollywood were to put this to film, it would not be rated R. It'd be rated NC-17. It's gross. So you ready? With that introduction, who couldn't be ready, right? All right. 17. One of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits on many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries." Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a desert. And there I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names. It had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand, filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. This title was written on her forehead: Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and the abominations of the earth. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Really. Then the angel said to me, "Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman, of the beast, the mystery of the woman and of the beast that she rides, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and will come up out of the abyss and then go to his destruction. The inhabitants of the earth dwellers, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because he once was, now is not, and yet will come. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. They are also the 7 kings. 5 have fallen, one is, the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain for a little while. The beast who once was and now is not is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7 and is going to destruction. Are you guys confused yet? Good. Got you right where I want you. Fun stuff here. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will make war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them because he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And with him he will be called, and with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers. Then the angel said to me, the waters you saw, where the prostitute sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to give the beast their power to rule until God's words are fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. Oh boy. This is a beautiful chapter with a lot of grotesque things. And basically it breaks down into these 3 categories. The great prostitute, obviously throughout the whole chapter, we'll describe her in great detail. The Spirit, what it does to bring us into the desert, and what we learn about what John learns there in the desert. And then the good thing about John in this one, seems like he gives explanation, but as soon as he gives explanation, there's more apocalyptic language to decipher, to unravel, to get to what the explanation actually means. So it was a little confusing there, right? Where we got the 5 that have fallen, the 1 who was, and another one's coming, and he's part of the 7, but he's an 8th. Oh, Carol, that is going to bug you, isn't it?
Well, he said 7, and then
7, and then he said 8. How could he do that to us? I don't know either. I know. We'll stir the brain up here, and let's go over the easy stuff first. Let's go over the great prostitute, okay? Backing up to the first verse, one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said, "Come, I will show you the punishment." Now remember, we had just finished the 7 bowls of punishment, God's wrath. And we're hitting the rewind button here. And John has given another view of this same judgment. So the 7 bowls of wrath give us a general judgment, a complete, God pours out his wrath like he did against Pharaoh, the Egyptians, the same kind of plague language. But now he zeroes in because he's introduced us to Babylon as one of God's enemy, culture, if you will. Any empire, any culture that is seductive and against God's will. And he starts to unravel these enemies one by one. We see in chapter 17 and 18, Babylon falls. And then in chapter 19, the beast of the beast fall. In chapter 20, the dragon. And we were introduced to those enemies in chapter 12 in the opposite order. The dragon first, then the beast, and the beast. In chapter 14, we had Babylon. And so what he's trying to do is get us to see that God is going to take care of, destroy completely the enemy. Todd has redeemed himself tonight. He is personally going to deliver the notes to you.
I missed last week, so hey, glad to have
All right, you got both. Good for you. Awesome. All right, so we're backing up. We're hitting the rewind button. We're going to take a look at how God destroys Babylon now. This week and next week, this Sunday and next Sunday, we're going to look at how God destroys Babylon. And it's a big picture. Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits on many waters. Now, when you think about those images and sitting on many waters, what is John really referring to? What country? What empire? The Roman Empire, yes. She's the one that sits on many waters. She's in Italy there. She's in the center of the Mediterranean Sea. And so sitting on many waters, it was very clear that this is who John's referring to in particular. Okay? Now, all of John's symbols, all of John's images move from particular to more general, to his day and situation, to the future. So, in particular, we're talking about the woman on the many waters. We're talking about Rome. This is a reference back to Babylon. In the Old Testament, Babylon was seen as the city, the country, the empire, if you will, that sits on the waters, the Euphrates. And so he's kind of playing on words there, working those two together. But it's obvious that he's referring to, in John's day, Rome, the woman who sits on the many waters. And so the great prostitute represents Rome. Represents Rome. And then it says, with her, the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. And so, no doubt, Rome had that kind of impact on other countries around it, like Israel and many others in the area that they took territories from. And the kings, like King Herod and other kings that were in the territories, brought them right into this grotesque idolatry and adulteries and the temples that were set up to worship Caesar. So she has drug everybody she can. Rome has brought everybody she can into this intoxication. It calls it the intoxication with the wine of her adulteries, the blood of the saints. That wine, that blood language coming together again, destroying the saints and shedding blood because they would not bow down to the Caesar, to Lord Caesar. Only to Lord Jesus would they bow down. So it's clear up front that the great prostitute is Rome in particular. But of course, throughout all of history, the great prostitute is any empire, any country, any ruling empire in all of history that scorns God and God's people and sheds God's people's blood. So you can attach that woman, that prostitute, that great prostitute, to any country in all of history. And just keep attaching it as the years go on. There'll be another country, another empire that looks like Rome, because he calls it Babylon. But we know he's talking about Rome. But since the image can move from time to time in history, it's going to move into other countries over the course of time. Other empires are going to be like Babylon. And so Babylon was God's greatest cultural enemy of the Old Testament. So Rome follows in the footsteps of Babylon. So does Russia at one time, China, Iran, North Korea, Iraq at one time, Germany at one time. And there's so many countries we could attach to this great prostitute. Now, for John and his readers, pretty clear. They knew he was talking about Rome. That's the world they lived in. That's the prostitution they were experiencing. Their blood was being shed. They knew of their fellow Christians who had died because they wouldn't bow down at the imperial cult worship centers. And so that was certainly part of their experience, which is pretty horrific, and it gets even worse. The angel carried me away. The second time in the book of Revelation this happens. The angel carried me away in the spirit to a desert. And in the spirit, he is led there, and he sees a woman sitting on a scarlet beast. And so you have this great prostitute then sitting on the beast that we've read about in chapter 13, the beast out of the sea and the beast out of the earth, this combination of the two-headed monster, if you will, the beast that calls people to worship it, and adore it. And so it has blasphemous names. The woman sat on scarlet that was covered with blasphemous names, the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The woman, dressed in purple and scarlet, glittering with gold, precious stones and pearls, kind of reminds us of the Revelation 12 woman that was adorned beautifully. And we saw that many venues of who that woman is. Israel, Eve, Mary, the church, God's people in general. That woman is beautiful. That woman gives birth to the Messiah. That woman is taken care of by God. That woman was beautifully adorned as well, like a goddess would be beautifully adorned. So the parody is on. He's showing a parody between that woman and this one in light of chapter 19 that's coming up, the wedding supper of the Lamb. So there's a bride that's going to show up in white, beautiful clothes. And so this one is dressed to the nines, and of course, Rome was pretty extravagant. It was very extravagant. And so to be dressed up like this, and to have all these elements involved in describing her, really describes the opulence of Rome. Very opulent, very, very loaded with money and taking from a lot of different places, but it has blasphemous names, 7 heads, 10 horns that resemble that beast, that resemble, actually, the dragon. In chapter 12, first description of the dragon was 7 heads and 10 horns. So this woman sitting on this beast looked like the dragon. So John's drawing the lines and connecting the dots for us. This woman, this beast, they all belong, the source of its evil belongs to the dragon, the serpent, Satan. And so we're closing in on who this is. She had a golden cup in her hand, filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. And so can you just imagine this, prostitute lady with a lot of makeup on and just all kinds of jewels and necklaces hanging on her, with a cup in her hand, swirling around, And she's taking a drink, and it's just coming off her lips and dripping down the side of her mouth. She's so drunk. She's so full of this wine. But when you look closely, a little closer, the wine is not fine wine that you really love to drink. It's the blood of the saints. That image has come through time and time again in Revelation. She is drunk on the blood of the saints. They're abominable things, filth of her adulteries. The title was written on her forehead, and we'll get to the title in just a minute, but just picture this woman straddling a beast. Can you get this grotesque picture? A woman, a prostitute, with blood on her hands and blood in her cup and blood dripping off her lips, straddling this beast that comes, the source of this beast comes from the dragon, the serpent, Satan. I mean, quite an image that's being portrayed here. Quite clear that this is Rome for John and his readers. Quite clear for us that this could represent just about any empire that loves the shed of Christian blood. And there are countries today that persecute Christians and kill Christians. Don't we have a pastor in Iran who's about to be sent to jail or maybe hanged because he converted from Islam to Christianity back in 2000, I believe, and they want to get him. Iran is a prostitute sitting on a beast, drinking the blood of the saints. Now, that's not a very popular thing to say, is it? It's not a very politically correct thing to say, but it's the truth. And John gives us a vivid picture. Now he gives this little statement in the middle. In your Bible, it's probably all capitals. Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes, the abominations of the earth. Whenever in symbolic language, when the word mystery shows up, it means symbol, or it means the unveiling of a symbol. That's all mystery means. It's just unveiling of a symbol, something like a symbol. So this mystery is just telling us this what you're seeing is like Babylon of old. She was great, she was mighty, but she was a prostitute, and she had the abominations of the earth. She had blasphemous names on her. And so the symbol is simply given here, and kind of a revealing, an unveiling of who this is. And John's just astonished. In fact, the very next thing he says, I saw the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus, and when I saw her, I was greatly astonished. I probably can't in words vividly describe to you how grotesque this image is. There is a graphic novel, I think we've talked about this before in class, the graphic novel of Revelation. It's a group that you need to like on Facebook. And I think what they've done is they've painted a lot of the symbolic images and pictures in Revelation in like professional drawings. And I wonder what this image looks like. I need to go on their website and check that out because it's got to be horrific. John was astonished by how gross this looked. But can you imagine? He knows, he knows this woman is sitting on a beast. Sounds like a bad B movie, doesn't it? It's just terrible. And she's sitting on this beast, probably half naked, and just blood dripping off of her lips. And he knows that that's the blood of my fellow brothers and sisters in Christ that's been shed. The symbol is rich. The symbol is deep. The symbol is complex. But it's very clear. This is absolutely disgusting to John. He's greatly astonished. I think one of the problems with American culture, if I may preach for just a moment, that one of the problems that we have in American culture is we are so desensitized to that which is gross. Right? We are so desensitized to violence, let's say. We watch people get blown. We're so good at creating death and creating the shedding of blood on a movie screen that we can really create it as if it's really happening. At least it seems like it. First time that really hit me was Schindler's List. That movie was disturbing on a very deep level and so seemingly real, like it was actually happening even though I knew it was a movie. And so our culture is so saturated with this that this image might not get to us like it did John. Maybe we're just so used to it, you know. John wasn't used to this. His world, I mean, he saw some bad things, but this really astonished him. This really got underneath his skin. This bothered him deeply. And so in the spirit, in the desert, this is the image he's given. A great prostitute on a beast with blood of the saints dripping off of her lips and a cup. It's like she has blood on her lips coming out and a cup full of more. You know, it's the drunk person that just can't get enough and is just staggering around, and she can't get enough. Rome and all of the countries around her that she has influenced can't get enough of destroying people who believe in God. It's just amazing. It's an amazing picture. Something that, ought to grab our attention a little more closely. And the angel just starts, okay, you've seen a picture. Let me explain. So we're already down to explanation given, but it's going to take the rest of our time to unravel because I don't think the explanation is as clear here as he explains other things in the book of Revelation. Boy, this one takes some effort to walk through. So he goes, why are you so astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that she rides, the 7 heads and the 10 horns. So he starts explaining in verse 8. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and will come out of the abyss and go to his destruction. We've seen that phraseology before. The one who was, is not, and will come up again. And this is again that image of Nero revisited. So you have that explanation of Nero revisited. There was that belief in their day that even though Nero had died back in earlier times in the Roman Empire, that he would come from the east and conquer once again, that he would be raised from the dead and conquer again. And some saw Domitian, the current Roman emperor, as like a reincarnation of Nero, that they thought he was that person. And the beast is kind of that image. The one who was, had a fatal wound, but it had been healed. The one who was, is not, and is to come again. And notice how the image starts to shift here as John is talking about judgment here. It shifts from he was, is not, and will come up, but now we're going to locate him out of the abyss. His source comes from the depths of evil, okay, where Satan lives. Or I don't know if you call that living. And then he says, and he will come up out of the abyss and go to his destruction. So it's like, even if you really think Nero's going to come back to life again, or if you think Domitian is Nero reincarnated, or whatever you may think about this beast that's been healed, he's still going to go to destruction. The whole system, the whole Roman system, the whole political system, and any political system since Rome till now will eventually die. Even American political system will not stand forever. Mark.
On that topic, my wife, who works at the University of Illinois, there was a professor on the East Coast who was beginning a discussion and saying, why are we tied to this archaic document called our Bill of Rights? I can't remember. I can't believe that.
Constitution?
Constitution.
Okay.
He's beginning that discussion of why do we even adhere to the Constitution anymore? It's an outdated, archaic document.
So a professor on the East Coast that your wife's aware of because she works at the U of I, he's talking about how why do we hold to the Constitution of the United States? It's archaic, it's old, it's meaningless, it's irrelevant.
And that document is what sets us apart from all of
Yeah, it's a very unique document. So, that kind of thinking is just, even people who hold to the Constitution, I believe, don't know how to interpret it anymore. They've lost the ability to interpret, to put it in its own context, to put it with the author's intent. They don't care about the author's intent anymore. They care about, well, how would I read it today? Just like they do with the Bible.
Their own thought pattern.
Right. And so you're going to have, we're not off the topic here, but America can become a beast. A political power that does not adhere to the ways of God and using that power in grotesque ways. I don't think we're in the grotesque area yet, but there are parts and pieces that are popping up, glimpses of that showing up in our culture, definitely. And it's kind of unnerving. And we could be, so like you said, so set apart from all other countries, but we're deciding to go down the Roman path. And if you study ancient Rome and Roman history and all the things that took place, it would be an eerie study because you'd be thinking we're talking about our place right here, just by the way we act and interact and react to things. So you have this beast who once was, now is not, will come up out of the abyss and go to his destruction. So this judgment language is still in play. Then the inhabitants of the earth dwellers, we've talked about the earth dwellers a lot, whose names have not been written in the book of life, so from the creation of the world, they will be astonished when they see the beast, because he once was, and now is not, and yet will come. And so just like in chapter 13, earth dwellers are like lemmings going over the cliff. They just kind of stare, and they look, and they follow blindly. Oh, yeah, how wonderful power is. How wonderful prosperity is. How wonderful this system, this beast that feeds me and feeds me and feeds me, and all of my lusts and all of my desires. And it gives me everything I want. And they don't quite see yet what you're going to see in this chapter, the self-destructive nature of evil. It collapses in on itself, and we're going to see that here in a little bit.
I have a little confusion.
Yeah.
It says whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world.
Yes. Confusion over the names not written in the book of life from the foundation of the earth.
Foundation of the world. It sounds like, well, you were predestined.
Sounds like predestination.
Right.
Wow.
Okay.
We could jump off on this topic.
That's what it is.
Sure. I don't know how far on this topic I want to go. Maybe me and you ought to talk afterwards in more detail, but think of it this way. God has set parameters in place from the foundation of the world. And it's like telling your kids this. Here's the fence line. You can play within the fence line. Don't go over the fence. Stay within here. This is my will for you to live and play and have fun time with your friends inside this fence line. Now, the fence line was established by God from the foundation of the world. You know, he's always said grace, mercy, that's going to be the traits. Like we said this morning, God's a giving God. Giving's a trait of God. So the generosity, the attributes of God are the fence line. This is who belongs to me. Now, doesn't necessarily say those he's picked out, you, not you, not you, you know. He's saying those who are in my fence line, those who I've established this from the very foundation of the world. This is who my people are going to be. This is how I want them to behave. It's going to be just like my son Jesus. Those who are there are there. Those who are not are not. And it's a hard text to unpack, but it's names. It's not individual names like I'm going to pick you out. And God says you're going to make it and you're not. You're going to make it. You're not. He's saying there's a way to live that pleases me. There's a way to live that looks like my son Jesus, and there's a way that's not. The way to live is what's been established from the foundation of the world. The way in which he wants people to live and the kind of person he wants. And I can say this about my kids too. I say, before Carrie and I had kids, I would tell her to the best of my ability, hey honey, our kids are going to behave this way when we decide to have kids. Our kids are going to sit at the table and have proper manners when we decide to have kids. The kind of kids I want to have look like this. Right? Do we all say that before?
Yeah.
We set something before our kids were born. Doesn't mean that we've determined that our kids are going to be a certain way, or that they're going to be inside that fence line or outside that fence line. It just means that we set the fence line. We said, this is the way I want my kids to be. It's the kind of kids I want. I'm about 75% there all the time. Proud of my kids, really am, but do they go outside that fence line? Never. All the time. All the time. Do we? And so comes the doctrine of forgiveness, how badly we need it. So think of it in terms of God's ideal community, God's ideal children that he wants. From the foundation of the world, there are those that were going to reject that, and there are those that are going to accept that. Okay? My best explanation. I could be all wrong, though. I'm sure somebody will, either online or somebody will come up and say, yeah, I think that's wrong. Okay. That's fine with me. They will be astonished, though. These that have chosen not to be a part of God's book of life, they will be astonished of the one who was, is not, and yet is to come. So, verse 9 says, this calls for a mind with wisdom. So, he's saying put on your thinking cap here and start thinking through this so you can see it for what it really is. And then we get early on we get clarity, and then we get confusion. So let's let's get the clarity first. The 7 heads are the 7 hills on which the woman sits. Well, for John's readers, that becomes a real clear thing. Rome was built on 7 hills. And everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. So it's very clear that he's directly, and no wonder he got put on exile in Patmos. And the very empire that puts him in exile, he's talking about them like they're a grotesque prostitute sitting on a beast. You know, the beast is like Rome and the prostitute's like Rome. They both kind of represent Rome, if you will, in various ways. The political system and the harlot herself, both are Rome in these images. And it's very clear, he makes it very clear, the 7 heads are the 7 hills on which the woman sits. So 7 hills of Rome. Rome was built on 7 hills. That's a clear reference. That part, not too bad to decipher if you're trying to figure out these images that are coming up. Then we get into this part. And let me tell you, it took me several years, I don't know how many severals there are in there, but to really figure this part out, because it reads like a riddle, does it not? They are also, not only are there 7 heads of the 7 hills, but they're also 7 kings. 5 had fallen. 1 is, the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain for a little while. The beast who once was and now is not is an 8th king. But he belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. Okay. Let's just spend some time here. Is that okay? Can we camp out, pitch a tent right here, and somebody make a fire for us? S'mores, you know? Okay. The 7 also represents 7 kings. Let me draw a line. Let's just say overall this thing is 7 kings. Okay? Some have taken this and said, okay, let's attach each of the emperors of Rome to each of these 7 kings and have it historically line up. Problem is you have about 4 out of many others that show up in AD 69 alone. That's how bad the Civil War was in the Roman Empire. There were 4 different kings in 1 year. Imagine 4 presidents in 1 year in America. That's how crazy it was at that time. So you're not going to be able to match up Roman Emperor A and Roman Emperor B all the way through 7 of them. That's not going to work. Let's go back. Let's keep our principles the same. That's why interpreting Revelation consistently with the symbolic nature of things helps unravel a riddle like this. What do we do with numbers? Tell me. Weigh them. We don't calculate them as, detailed literalists. They are symbolic numbers, deeply symbolic. So what does 7 say to you? Complete, whole. So is he talking about 7 individual kings, or would you think John's talking about the Roman Empire from beginning to end? The complete Roman Empire. All 7 kings, meaning all the emperors, from the time it began until the time it ends. If you start there, maybe the riddle starts to make a little more sense. It's going to still take some time to unravel. Well, let's walk through it. So if we establish that the 7 kings symbolically show us the entirety, the completion of the Roman Empire from beginning to end, then we're not so locked into individual numbers, are we? Now we're locked into symbolic thinking, like we should be anyways, because this is apocalyptic literature. And so here we go. There's 7 kings. What does he say first? 5 have fallen. 5 have fallen. What would that tell you? Maybe where you are in the timeline of the Roman Empire, or just that time has passed. Maybe more than half the time. Maybe it's not that literal either. Maybe it's just, it's incomplete. 5 have fallen, meaning we've come a ways already. We already have a Roman emperor history, right? A Roman Empire history. 5 have fallen. Time has passed. How much time? Are we through more than half of the emperors? That's not really the point, I don't think. I think it's just incomplete. Just like 6 is incomplete, 5 is incomplete too. It just gets us moving there. Paula, great observation. Good job. So 5 have fallen. So what he's saying is that we've had emperors come and go, right? And of course, by John's day, that's true. More than 5, by the way. Many more than 5 have fallen and come and gone. 4 in 1 year. So he's saying we've come through some time. We've come through some kings. It's here and gone. And then he says one what? One is. One is. And in his day, that would be Domitian. Domitian's the Roman emperor at the time. Domitian. So one is. And then he says the other, meaning what? Out of the 7, there's another, but is it one other? Or is he talking about the end of the empire? You see. So he's trying to show here is that the Roman Empire has come. It still is. It still has some time to go. But it's nearing, maybe nearing more of a conclusion than it ever had in the past. Maybe it's moving in a certain direction. 5 have fallen. 1 is. The other has not yet come. But then he describes the one not yet come. Not that these are individual numbers. Okay? Again, symbolically, he's just talking about the end of the empire or from his day forward. Is really what he's talking about. From my day forward. And we know the Roman Empire lasted several hundred more years. So technically it may have been more in the middle of the empire at this point in time, but it may be close to this. But he's just talking about an emperor that has yet to come, or, well, let's just read it. When he does come, he must remain for a little while. So he's limited in his power and scope. And then the beast, who's being described as the same as that Nero revisited, maybe reincarnated Domitian, whoever we want to attach this to, it's obvious the language is the same. The one who was, the beast who was, once was, now is not, is an 8th king. Oh, man. Over here. Big 8 over here on the side. He's an 8th king. And then he says this other one, who's the 8th king, belongs to the other 7. That's where you probably... What's that? Yeah. Yeah. The kings are in cahoots together. Now, to unravel this, let's just simplify. What do we know about the 8th king for sure? So what's the one thing we know? He's destroyed, but I mean, besides that, he's what? He's part of the 7. That's one thing he says. The 8th is part of the 7. So he's not getting outside of this particular timeline, so to speak, of the Roman Empire. He's just saying within the Roman Empire and its totality and its history, there is one called an 8th king that belongs to this whole, okay? So the 8th king that belongs to this whole. Let's go back to our interpretation skills here. I know, the muscles are grinding here at this point in time. weigh the number 8 out for me. What have we said about the number 8 in the book of Revelation? Even though this is the only time the number 8 shows up in the book of Revelation, what do we know about 8? Jesus. You remember? Jesus equals 8, 8, 8. Okay? So when John says this is an 8th king who belongs to the other 7, who is not, and is to come, but out of the abyss and to his destruction, I believe my interpretation of this is he's talking about the current day Emperor Domitian, who acts like a Nero revisited, because this particular Emperor Domitian, like Nero of old, is destroying Christians and is about to go on a rampage against Christians. And it's going to get uglier in the next few centuries with other emperors. But Domitian has that same blood, thirst, and lust to go after Christian blood. And he acts like the beast out of the sea, the one who had a fatal wound that seemed to be healed, the one who was and is not and wants to come again. But John makes it clear his destination is destruction. He makes it clear that he'll come up out of the abyss to his destruction. He belongs to the 7, and he's going to his destruction. Hear that clearly. He's going to his destruction. So he's an 8th king, and what he's trying to say is he's one who acts like our Savior. He's one who acts like the one who's died and been raised again and will live forever, but he's not. He's the one who has died and acts like he's coming back again, but goes to his destruction. He's Satan, the beast. He's possibly Domitian as far as an identity goes. The Emperor Domitian, who has it out for the Christians, who acts like a Christ, who acts like a Messiah figure, who had a fatal wound but was healed of that fatal wound. He belongs in the series of emperors in the 7. He belongs to the 7. It doesn't necessarily say he belongs to the very end of the 7 or the middle or the beginning. He just says that the 8th king belongs to the 7, and he goes to his destruction. And he's described exactly like the beast out of the sea, exactly like the current political system of Rome, exactly like the Roman Emperor Domitian as he was conducting business at this particular time in John's day. That is a very difficult text, to say the least. Yes?
The 1 is and the 8 are the same. Because you said the 1 is probably...
My guess is the 1 is the same as the 8th king. That's my take on it, yes. Meaning the current emperor is the 8th king. Or you can say it this way, the current emperor is the one who acts like Jesus. And that's why he attaches the number 8 to him. Chris? Right. Understand all these images are attached to each other, and then they start falling in and collapsing in on each other. We're going to get to that in a minute. Because the beast looks like a symbol for Rome. The prostitute and the woman sitting on the beast looks like a symbol for Rome. These kings look like symbols of the Roman emperors, the Caesars. And no matter what number you attach to them, there are a series of 7. It means there's a complete list of them. There's an 8th one that belongs to the 7. He's in that list, and he looks like a Christ. He looks 8. He looks like an 8. An 8 looks like Jesus. You know? And so John will use these images to describe the same thing, Rome. He will use the beast is Rome. The woman is Rome. The kings are Rome. They all represent the political, evil empire system of Rome and how they attack Christians, and they have the blood of the saints on their lips, on their hands, in their cup. What he's going to show us here at the end of this chapter is how it collapses in on itself. He'll separate them out and say, well, then the beast destroys the woman, or vice versa, or you have other kings that come in and destroy. Well, that's what evil does, doesn't it? It destroys itself. It collapses in on itself. We'll get to that in a minute. I know this seems very, very confusing, but understand that John's trying to get us to see political structure, political power that has galvanized itself in self-worship, and I'm the boss. That and rejecting God, blasphemous names, rejecting God. That image is going to come through in so many different ways. It's almost like the beast out of the sea takes on all kinds of meaning. There's always an empire waiting for it to attach itself to, because Satan works through the beast. You could call Herod a beast because he tried to devour the male child when he was born. You could call Hitler a beast. You can call Stalin a beast. You can call the Iranian president a beast. You can call North Korean president a beast. Because Satan is using this political power. Beast, let's put it this way. Beast would equal political power in all of the wrong ways. All the evil, political, we even put in here evil power. And so sometimes the beast is Rome, because Rome was a political evil power. And sometimes it's Germany. And sometimes the beast is North Korea. And sometimes the beast is Iran. And sometimes in some, you can go through all of history. You can go, and of course, he calls the beast Babylon, a great enemy. So the beast is always a politically evil power. That's Satan. It's like one of the tools in Satan's tool shed. That he pulls out the beast and he draws it out of the sea, this evil and chaos, and he says, I'm going to put you to work. And he goes after these countries and these empires, and he uses them for evil, to destroy God's people. And then he describes the Rome as well, like he would any other, empire, like a woman, a goddess, but a grotesque one, a prostitute. Just like Old Testament, Hosea goes to marry a prostitute, to live out this life of disenchantment with his wife who's a prostitute, and the whole time she is a symbol of Israel, who is a prostitute to God. And so the evil empire can look like a woman who's a prostitute. But notice, let's get down to what happens here. But we got some of the things to unravel, but notice how the prostitute and the beast end up colliding against each other instead of colluding with each other. And how evil will turn on itself. And you've seen that. Guys fighting for the evil leader. They fight, and then they see that he's going down. They're like, oh, let's join in and kill him. It reminds me of, this is a little more milder, but Wizard of Oz. All the marching guys, and they're following the witch wherever the witch goes. They're all behind the witch, witch. And then they pour water on her, the witch is going down, and they're all like, oh, thank God you killed her. We'd do it ourselves if we could have. Thank you, Dorothy. And so evil turns in on itself quickly. I mean, in a moment's notice, it'll turn on itself. It'll collapse in on itself. I think this roof's going to collapse here in just a minute. Let's keep reading. Chris, hang with me. You hanging? Okay, good. This is the big. I know it's big stuff. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received the kingdom. So he is talking future here. Who are these 10 kings? And does 10 really matter? Probably not. Who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast? What is he saying there? There's going to be future kings. They'll spawn out of this beast-like political power and system. He says 10. That's just a number. You weigh it, it's just a lot of kings to come. Who for 1 hour receive their power from the beast. What does that mean? Do they literally rule for 60 minutes? What does he mean? Short time. Good, you guys are catching on. These kings in the future that are fueled by the beast. See, the beast is always just a fuel for political power. Call it Rome, call it Babylon, call it Germany, call it Iran, call it whatever you want. The beast is the political fuel for evil power. And he gives this power to these 10 kings of the future. So John is saying there's still a future to go here within the Roman Empire, but it's short-lived. For 1 hour they receive their power from the beast. It's short, it's quick. And it says this, they have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. And so they go back to the beast and say, you are so wonderful. You give us our power. And then they will make war against the Lamb. So the future kingdoms will, and they did, in the Roman Empire, they did make much, much more blood on their hands later than Domitian against Christians. One of the bloodiest times in the 1st and 2nd centuries of the church. In 3rd century, before Constantinople and all that took place, and that's a whole other history lesson. So they make war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them because why? He's the Lord of Lords, he's the King of Kings. And with him will be called his chosen faithful followers. I love that. There is a little chiasm here. If we can... You have these 10 kings who go to make war against the Lamb. They have short, 1 hour, short period of time of reigning. And they says they get their power from the beast. Now the chiasm, this is a little different chiasm. It's quite different. But it's like opposite parallelism. Can I say that again? Opposite parallelism. 10 kings get their power from the beast. But the Lamb overcomes and wins the war along with the ones that get their power from the Lamb, the chosen. Small little chiasm. They're opposites. 10 kings get power from the beast, but they lose to the Lamb who gives power and victory to the chosen. That is, the called, chosen, and faithful followers. So these guys follow the beast and lose. This guy beats the beast, the Lamb beats the beast, and he has followers, us. Paula. Isn't that crazy? The Lamb overcomes the beast. How does God win victory? Through sacrifice. That's why chapter 14 makes the most sense to me as it does now. How does God's wrath get poured out on his enemies? Through the sacrifice and the blood of the saints and of his Son Jesus. He puts us in the winepress, allows us to go through suffering so that he can vindicate us one day, but so that he can use our blood, our sacrifice, to destroy the enemy. Seems oxymoronic, but it works. God's wrath was poured out on his Son Jesus on the cross. Nothing going to change about that, and nothing's going to change about how we follow Jesus. So we too follow him by carrying a cross. So yeah, the Lamb, through sacrifice, beats the beast. It doesn't make sense in the animal kingdom, does it? You think a beast could tear apart a lamb? Vulnerable, little sheepy lamb? Beast is going to win every time, right? Not in apocalyptic literature and not in God's economy, okay? Then we get to some interesting stuff here. Then the angel said to me, the waters you saw, where the prostitute sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. And that's the world of the Roman Empire. They crossed all kinds of borders, all kinds of languages, all kinds of peoples, tribes, everywhere. They had a power over their known world. What John's trying to show us that even though that power is great, she loses. She's not as powerful as you think she is. Because it says here, the beast and the 10 horns you saw will what? Hate the prostitute. Evil turning on itself. The two images that were Rome, beast and prostitute, now the beast will hate her. Now the beast will turn around and say, hey, get off of me. I mean, follow the image. She's sitting and riding. Why is she riding? Well, you ever heard the phrase riding somebody's coattails? At Rome, the prostitute is riding the coattails of the demonic tool of Satan, the beast out of the sea, the political evil power beast. She's like, okay, I'll use political power to my advantage. And so Rome rides. And the beast all of a sudden gets tired of her riding and says, you know what? I hate you. I hate you. And they say, they will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. And when he says the beast and the 10 horns will hate, we're going back to the 10 horns as these 10 kings, future kings that have not yet received power, because that's how it went down with Rome. There was an insurrection, if you will. There was kings that came in and destroyed Rome that had enough. And the beast, I think the beast decided, really the image is this. The beast has Rome, the woman, sitting on her, and so the beast kind of colludes with Rome and looks like Rome and rides, and the woman's riding the beast and all of its evil. And then one day in the future, the beast is like, no, I've had enough of you. I'm going to let these 10 kings step in and destroy you. Notice the beast is still living. The beast is still active. This beast is still going forward. Okay? But he's like, you don't get to ride my coattails anymore. And he hates her. And he brings these 10 horns, these 10 kings in with him and destroys her. Evil does that to each other. Evil will destroy itself, always. What's that? It's a user, exactly. It's like if you were to go into the ghettos of Chicago, it's the drug dealers. They don't care about you. No matter what you might think, no matter what they might say to you, they will use you for their own gain. That's the beast. So it turns on itself. It really turns on the woman who it colluded with at one time, but now is going to destroy. You're always going to get in trouble if you go in with evil. It will always bite you back. And in fact, God has kind of ordered the world this way. Verse 17, God has put it into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to give the beasts their power to rule until God's words are fulfilled. It's like he's saying, I'm going to let this happen. Rome, I'm going to let you fall. I'm going to let other evil kings who ride the beast and go and collude with the beast to cause you to fall, because really what it's saying is that you're going to get a taste of your own medicine. This is how you treated people. This is how you destroyed Christians. This is how you treated society, and you put them in slavery, which we'll talk about next week big time. This is how you did things. Well, it's going to be done to you, and I'm going to allow it to happen. This is my purpose, to destroy you in this way, that you would drink the blood that you shed. Then he says, the woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. So he ties up the loose end from the beginning. I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits on many waters, Rome. And then he comes back and says, the woman you saw that just got destroyed, well, she's the one who rules over the kings of the earth. She's the great city. And Babylon was called the great city. And so this is like the old Babylon. This is a woman who's destroying everybody, and Christians included. That's chapter 17. And it is probably the most difficult to me, chapter 17 is like getting your Christmas lights out and untangling them and checking for each one to see which one works. That's, for me, chapter 17. It's so hard to pull those images, because we get so locked into, we just have this tendency to lock into literalism. We want 5 kings to represent 5 actual kings. We want one that is to represent the one that is. We want the one that is to come, and 10 that are to come to represent 10 that are to come. When we need to see the big apocalyptic picture and the symbolism that lies therein. There's a set time for the Roman Empire to exist from here to there. And what John is telling the readers is we're in the midst of that. And there's one that looks like Jesus. Don't be deceived by that one that looks like Jesus that comes into rule. He looks like he's been fatally wounded. He's been healed. He's an 8th king that belongs to the 7. He's going to his destruction. The woman's going to her destruction. And the beast is precipitating all of this. And the beast drags in anybody, beast is dragging in anybody and anything he can to cause destruction. The good news is, once we get past Babylon here, next chapter, God himself will deal with that beast that keeps dragging things in final judgments, as God can only do. So the good news is the beast can't keep doing this forever. Unfortunately, he's still at large, wielding his power. We feel the effects of it. We see it on the news. Any country, any empire, any person who allows evil and the power of politics to take over their lives, well, one, they're automatically going to run into conflict with Christians, right? Because we are not going to bow down to any other Lord. We are not going to bow down to anybody who says they're God or sets themselves up as God. That's what the beast does. That's his M.O. He sets himself and anybody he influences up as God. And so there's always going to be a conflict between the beast and Christians. Always. And you can see it in individuals, you can see it in countries, you can see it in empires. Throughout history, even today. But one day we have reassurance that God will destroy that. It will be gone. The conflict will end. Until that day, we pray for his coming so that it happens. But we're not there yet. So that's 17. 18 is just an amazing chapter. In vivid language, it will start describing to you something that's going to really sound like America. At least sound like the influence that America has in the world today is very similar to the influence Rome had in its world. Very similar. That all systems and all networks are connected. That people rely upon us. You know, my eyes have been open lately as I watch politics, as I watch the news, how much money America sends to countries. Isn't that amazing? Millions and billions of dollars that we send. Now, for the most part, I'm hoping and I'm thinking that it's generosity, that we want to help others out that are in need. But what has happened is the beast has gotten its way in here and caused dependency, indebtedness, slavery, and a network that is propagating more and more evil as we go along. And we look like Rome way, way too much. We look like Babylon way, way too much. Because when you read chapter 8, go ahead and read chapter 18 before you come back next week. Because when you read 18, you're thinking, if America were to fall today, could chapter 18 be called the fall of America? And could it just be written as is? That'd be interesting. We just mimic it way too much. I'm not saying we are Babylon. I'm not saying John wrote this with America in his mind. He didn't. What I'm saying is Babylon finds itself in various cultures throughout time. And when you read this, it is scary. History does repeat itself.
If we would just look into history and see what happened, why would we keep going that same route?
Because we don't like to look into history. We want to make our own history. We don't like to look back and learn our lessons. We are the kings of our own domain today, here and now. Why learn from history? If we were learning from history, we wouldn't be going down this economic strife that we're going through right now. That's for sure. Somebody would wake up and say, we've been down this road before, and it did not work. But that's not going to happen. Yeah. It's insanity. Doing the same thing, expecting different outcomes. So, a lot to digest here in robots. Oh, the beast is like a puppeteer. Yeah, the beast pulls the strings and causes us to see what images we want to see and should see and look at. That's why I think when John says this calls for a mind with wisdom, he says that in this chapter. He's saying, Christians, you get wise to this. Get wise to this. And it's not that it's going to be us versus the world and let's shove the world out and let's hunker down here in our little bunker down here. It's not that. Saying get wise to what's going on around you and you get proactive. You bring new creation to this world. By the power of the Spirit, you create something new. You create something more beautiful. You create something that is life-giving and counteract the death-giving political powers. You go out and plant gardens, is what he's saying. You go out and plant gardens. You go out and bring new life out of the earth. You go out and bring new life out of people's lives. You expose to them that they're caught in the slavery of sin. And part of that sin and part of that slavery comes from political powers waging war on your life, playing you like a puppet. And John says, get wise to this. This calls for a mind with wisdom. Get wise. Church, do something to make a difference in your world. We have a purpose here and now, and our purpose is to make this as much like new heavens and new earth as we possibly can by the power of the Spirit, awaiting the day for God does it once and for all. That means we got work to do, because the world doesn't look like a new heavens and new earth yet. But we're here to try to make it look like that more and more and more. And when we do that, lives are changed. Lives are changed. Slavery, the bonds of slavery go away. And people come out of the baptistry a new person, a new creation. And they're not subject to bowing down to the beast anymore. They're not earth dwellers anymore, the inhabitants of the earth. That's our purpose. That's our goal. I'm preaching now. We'll just tie up the class now, and let's see where we're at on time. Ooh, we got about 9 minutes. I don't know if you have any further questions that we want to address. We can do that. Or if you're ready to go watch some Super Bowl action. I think we're ready to do that. Okay, we'll be done here. Who's rooting for the Ravens?